What we have left to do is to look at these three subgroups in the mammals and see what makes each of these subclasses, the monotremes, the marsupials, and the placentals, different from each other. We need to see what's the basis of this division, and it turns out it has to do with the reproductive event, or the birth event. So the basis of division between the subclasses of the mammals is reproduction. All mammals have internal fertilization, but the length of the time that the embryo is held in the female's body is called gestation, and that's very different for the different groups. So let's look at our first subclass, the monotremes. The monotremes are the egg-laying mammals. We don't think of mammals laying eggs, but they do. And the egg that they lay is kind of reptilian. It's a leathery egg rather than a hard-shelled egg, so more like the reptile egg than the bird egg. But when the young are hatched from these eggs, they still nurse like all mammals do from the mammary glands of the mother. Now, the only kind examples of the monotremes that we know of are the spiny anteater, or the echidna, and the duckbill platypus. This egg is an amniotic egg, so it has the same extra embryonic membranes that we see in the bird egg or the reptile egg: the amnion, the allantois, the chorion, and the yolk sac, nutrients, gas exchange, waste disposal, and a protective fluid-filled sac. So they have an egg. Now let's move on to the marsupials. The marsupials are our pouched mammals. They when their babies are born, they're born extremely underdeveloped, kind of premature, and the reason for that is they have a small yolk sac for their embryo, but it's not very large, and they don't lay an egg. So when the yolk sac is used up, they're born, and they finish their development in their mother's pouch. So they're just not fully formed. They finish their development inside the pouch, and so we have kangaroos and koala and possum. There are other marsupials, but that's a pretty good list to know. But the key is that when they're born premature because they've used up the nutrient material they have around them in the uterus, and they have to finish their development. They'll climb up into the pouch and attach to the teat and suckle and nurse and finish their development in the pouch. So now we can move on to the placental mammals. Now, in the placentals, the babies are born fully developed. They have all their parts. They're ready to go. Now, they may not be able to care for themselves yet, but they are fully formed. Now, the key to that is the structure of the placenta. So we need to talk about what the placenta is and what it's doing that the other mammals don't have. So if we draw some pictures here, and so I'm going to draw a little embryo. So here's my embryo, and it's inside the uterus, and it's surrounded, of course, by the amnion, the fluid-filled sac that all amniotes have around them. Now, instead of having a yolk sac, the placental animals have a structure called the placenta. It's an extension of the baby's body. You'd think an umbilical cord from where your belly button is, and this tissue comes out here, and it attaches to the wall of the mother's uterus. And this placenta is got lots of folds in it, and it grows right into the wall of the uterine lining of the mother. And this placenta is vascularized, meaning there's blood vessels from the baby that run out in here. And these blood vessels that are in this placenta allow for exchanges between the baby's body and the mother's body. The uterine lining is also highly vascularized, but the one thing to know here is that the mother's blood and the baby's blood never mix. There are just exchanges made back and forth from the mother's blood, nutrients and antibodies and other things that the baby needs, oxygen, and from the baby's blood into the mother's blood, waste products and carbon dioxide. So as these exchanges are being made, nutrients and oxygen antibodies can cross over. Unfortunately, so can poisons such as alcohol and drugs can also pass across this divide between the mother's blood and the baby's blood and feed the embryo, and the waste products can be passed out. So the placenta takes over the job of certain embryonic membranes that we saw in the amniotic egg. We no longer need the chorion for gas exchange. The placenta does that. We no longer need the allantois for waste storage, because the waste can be removed to the mother's blood, and the mother's body can get rid of those wastes. And we no longer need the yolk sac for nutrients, because the mother is feeding the baby across from her blood nutrients to the baby's blood. So there are three divisions and the basis of those divisions within mammals. So I thought with the time we have left, we'd just run through some of the diversity within the placentals because we're placentals. Now I know this is a lot of typed words on a TV screen and that or a computer screen, and that's a lot to read, but let's just look at this. Within the subclass placentals, we have a lot of different orders, and this is not all of them. These are just the ones you have to memorize. Kind of kidding about that, but these are ones that you should be a little bit familiar with. These aren't things that should be too unusual for you. We have the rodents and the lagomorpha, which include the rabbits, the chiroptera, the flying mammals, the bats. Order Cetacea, and think sea, Cetacea, the swimming, some of the swimming, the dolphins and the whales, the swimming mammals, and we need to address that. Mammals are terrestrial animals. The evolution of the dolphins and whales represents a movement back to water. These are air-breathing with lungs mammals. And so it's interesting that somewhere in evolution they return to water, but we've been terrestrial ever since the reptiles. The Sirenia with the manatee, and if you've ever seen manatee in the wild, the word serene or calm is a appropriate term for them. So, and then the carnivora, which are all the cats, lions, and bears. Insectivora, edentata, the armadillos. We're here in Texas. We have lots of armadillos. The order Perissodactyla and Artiodactyla, are hooved animals. The difference here is odd-toed. By odd, usually the number one. One is an odd number. If you think of a horse footprint, it looks like this, as opposed to a deer footprint, which has kind of has two toes or even-toed. The proboscis means nose, the elephants with their long snouts, and then the primates. So let's look at some pictures real quick. Just for the cuteness factor, we have our rodents and our lagomorphas, our chiroptera, the bats, the Sirenia, the manatee, and the Cetacea, the dolphin. On this page we have our carnivora, the cats and the dogs and the bears, the canines and the I don't know the order name for these guys, but they're awful cute. And then we have our insectivores and our armadillos, our edentata, our hooved animals, the odd-toed and the even-toed hooved animals, mammals, the proboscia, the elephants, and finally the primates. And this one went a little long, this video, but I hope that you got a good overview of the subclass mammals, and that is our last video in our series on vertebrate diversity. We worked our way up from the other chordates, the subphyla of chordata, through the vertebrates and all the way up to mammals, and then within mammals we ended with primates.